However, there's still a large amount missing from the picture. Each bubble in the table below is a data breach that puts Australians at risk of possibly serious harm. The table is based on official record of data breaches reported to the Office of Australian Information Commissioner and first obtained and published by ABC. The data, among other important shortcomings, does not name the organisations involved in each breach. But it still offers most detailed portrait ever of the scale of problem. The size of bubbles represents the number of people affected worldwide from each data breach reported to OAIC. Data breach disclosures reported to the OAIC since 2020. A handful of anonymized entries in the log have been identified by ABC. A quick look at the data tells us that we have missed a few things in recent years. Significant breaches occurred in both 2020 and 2021, affecting more than 10 million people worldwide, and we still don't know which companies these affected or what kind of data was breached. But one thing chart makes clear is that violations that led to biggest headlines, such as optus and medibank violations in late 2022, were not isolated incidents. They did not suddenly appear. Last year, 164 fewer data breaches were exposed compared to 2020. Although this dataset reveals the extent of the problem more clearly than ever, it still does not capture its full size. ABC has confirmed that data breaches involving at least 2 multinational giants are not covered by reportable events in Australia and therefore never appear in the dataset. And there could be so much more. Media reports claimed that Zoom, Meta, Microsoft, Twitch and Panasonic suffered from data breaches. All of these companies refused to respond to ABC's questions about whether their breaches triggered notification requirements Australian authorities. Do you have insider information about a data breach? Contact julian.fellock.au. Given the possibility of numerous significant unreported violations and more, it is clear that the OAIC's disclosure log is not a complete record of violations affecting Australians. This is at least in part because in order to qualify for disclosure under the Privacy Act, a data breach must put affected individuals possibly at risk of serious harm. Who decides if there is such a risk? The organisation apparently affected by the data breach can make this assessment itself by deciding whether there is a serious risk of harm and therefore whether the breach should be disclosed. Lyria Bennett-Moses, a cybersecurity law expert at UNSW, believes that organizations are not well positioned to conduct this assessment. The infringed organization explains that only they will know what information they have added to the ecosystem, not what information is already there. Lyria Bennett-Moses wants Australia's disclosure laws strengthened. A bit of information may not tell anyone much about an individual. This is known as the mosaic effect, and this is a big reason why Professor Bennett-Moses said Australia's disclosure laws should be strengthened. An OAIC spokesperson said that organisations should consider the risk of serious harm holistically. The spokesman did not elaborate further on how the mosaic effect was explained in practice. Amazon and Microsoft said they were complying with their legal obligations. An Amazon spokesperson said it had been notified to relevant regulatory bodies when necessary. Jane Andrew is the co-chair of a research effort at the University of Sydney Business School that tracks media reports on data breaches. After reviewing the anonymous disclosure data obtained by ABC, his first reaction was to tell us that this was a lot that wasn't reported to the public. As a community, we're really talking about a few data breaches, he says, adding that this level of transparency around data breaches is pretty extraordinary. Jane Andrews says, there must be requirements to publicly report data breaches. Data breaches now are regular occurrence, but we are often unaware scale of them, organizations they impact, nature data that is made available, or how organizations trying to mitigate these risks. And if we don't know the scale of it, we can't even talk about it. When a breach is detected, organizations should only notify the regulator and those directly affected by it. The vast majority incidents, including 2 of the 3 largest on record, remain unidentified despite help Professor Andrew's team. The biggest data breaches announced to the OAIC since 2020. After further investigation, OAIC found that the number of Australians affected by two largest unidentified breaches was 729,646 and 186,091, respectively. These may be biggest breaches in terms of people affected, but their size tells us nothing about complexity of attacks that cause them. Optus was responsible for the digital equivalent of leaving the window open, and a single compromised password was enough to access Medibank's customer data. But the nature of other data breaches, which are necessary to fully understand the cyber threat facing Australia, is still frustratingly inaccessible. We don't even know when many of these violations actually occurred. The dates in disclosure log refer only to when OAIC was notified of them, and timing of violations is questioned, as well as possibility that companies sit on prior to disclosure. All we have to go on is the bulk numbers. The latest report showed that it takes more than a month for 29% of violations to be reported. Some of breaches in the diary occurred months, or even years, before data showed them. We just don't know which of them. Building trust in the system. Professor Andrew believes that current disclosure laws leave a lot of discretion in the hands of organizations that have been subjected to violations. In the current situation, he says, it is impossible to create an informed opinion of what we can or should expect from the organizations we entrust our data with. A recent incident involving Medical Research Institute QIMR Berghofer is the latest example of a data breach that has not been officially announced to public. A subset, the Institute's skin cancer research data, has potentially been exposed by a breach of the server's third-party contractor data time. QIMR Berghofer has informed all individuals and the relevant regulator of the data breach in accordance with its legal obligations, but has not been required to make any public statements. The Institute continued to conduct surveys without the potential participants being aware of the breach. QIMR Berghofer was not required to make any public statements regarding a data breach. Professor Andrew believes reforms should be implemented that require organizations to report data breaches to the public. He likens the situation to the transparency expected from companies in ASX. Our stock market is tight, meaning we can trust the information provided.